Florespark, Texas, the home of Rippaverse, has been the subject of superheroes, supervillains, dirty companies, mind-bending research, and yes, even a war. But the question that we're going to set out to answer today is, where is Florespark? So before we go any further with this video, I want to make one thing completely clear. This is not my theory. I'm not the one who noticed this. I'm not the one who found these details. This was brought to me by a Rippaverse fan named Jokingly, who is probably one of the most analytical readers I've ever met in my life. He's the one that brought the theory to me, pointed out the evidence, and when I suggested that he should make a video about it, he said he didn't really like making content, so I should do it. So here we are. Now, I did manage a couple contributions, and they were mostly ways of checking if he was right, things that could falsify the theory, and we'll get into that later. But anyone here who knows Jokingly, give him a shout out. This is his theory, and it's a good one. So what do we already know? Well, of course, Florespark is in Texas. The Great War of Separation separated Texas from the United States. It is constantly referred to as Florespark, Texas. It's on the Norfolk Couture poster as Florespark, Texas. So for the entirety of this video, we're going to ignore any location that is not Texas. How do we tighten the circle from there? So right at the beginning of this, when it all started, in a Rippaverse Discord call, as usual, where most theories start, there were some clues that jumped right out but didn't actually help as much as we thought. The first one being a particular villain being sent to Huntsville Penitentiary. The thing about that is, that's a real prison in Texas. Huntsville is a real place in Texas. So thinking from there, you could say, oh, okay, well, if we can say which prison he went to, we could look at what prison region and the court system and give us a general idea. And the reason that ultimately didn't hold is because you have to remember all of these events are happening after the Great War of Separation. Texas has seceded from the United States, so there is no reason to believe that the existing government infrastructure, the political structures, will be around. They'd be making a new one, and Texas gained territory in the Great War of Separation, if you look at the map, which, by the way, we have created an interactive Google map that will show you exactly where you are, or your hometown, or whatever address you want to see, which nation it would be in post Great War of Separation, to include the newly revealed Badlands. So that is in the description if you're interested. Now, another thing that didn't help get a location exactly, but it did confirm that there are some constants from real life that we can use. So in Great War of Separation Part 2, there's a scene where Zeno, on his way to Florespark, stops at a gas station, and it specifically says that is Interstate 35, I-35. That's a real highway in Texas. And even though it doesn't necessarily help us pin the location down, it does tell us that real-world highways in Texas apply to the Rippaverse, so now we can consider that when we see other panels. It is going to tell us something later. The next big clue didn't remove much of Texas from the possibility, but it did give us a slight shave of potential areas. So Sydney Bloodruth in Bloodruth 1 says she is called west, so we're just going to assume wherever she's going is to the west of where she currently is. And although we don't know exactly where she is, the back of the Sydney Bloodruth Dokemon card says her birthplace is Victory, Texas. There's a Victory, Texas, and it is to the far east limits of the state. So it cuts off a small portion where you could travel east from there and still be in Texas. So the circle gets a little bit smaller. Another thing you want to look at is from the Great War of Separation, they are fleeing Austin. When the Great War of Separation starts, Austin obviously is seen as a very risky place to be. So the entire city evacuates, everybody leaves by car. They specifically mention people going southwest and to the east. And something that Jokingly pointed out to me is, it's a little weird that nobody said north. Maybe we should be looking north. So from there, this is kind of where I started looking for things that could identify the area, things that would tell us if you were in the right or wrong place. I thought of a couple events. There is a direct mention of when Isom was a kid watching a train. So any city that doesn't have a train, or at least the ability for a train to pass through, can't possibly be the place. Of course, to the outskirts of Florespark is Shadow Valley. Now, Shadow Valley is depicted in ISOM 1. You see Silman Ranch, you see a number of places, and it's always mountains. Valleys necessitate mountains. So we're going to be looking for mountain ranges, at least in the nearby area. Flatlands are off the table. Another thing that could potentially falsify the theory is we would have to see oil. Now, not necessarily oil fields. If you watched the video on the Great War of Separation timeline, you know that the Rippaverse main timeline where ISOM is happening is more than likely in the future, which means the infrastructure might not exist, but what would have to exist is oil. So if we could find no indication that it was possible to drill for oil in whatever location, that can't possibly be the city. And then finally, of course, the famous scene in Alpha Core where Ingrid Valdez, let's say, extrajudicially grounds an aircraft, would tell you there has to be an airport. If we get to an area and it's completely rural and unlevel ground where you couldn't possibly put an airport, that can't possibly be the place. Unfortunately, this is kind of describing quite a bit of Texas. So the theory went on, jokingly kept reading, kept talking more and more, bringing up new clues, new evidence, a couple things that ended up, I think, being inspirations for panels in the story, but when pinned to a location, didn't make sense with the rest of the information. I would suggest joining the Rippaverse Discord. It's a lot of fun. And then one day, I get a message. I know where it's at. We immediately start talking, and what he had pointed out was in the Great War of Separation, when they drove, it shows a young Avery Silman prior to ever being called ISOM in the back of the car asking the age-old question any kid would ask in a long drive. Are we there yet? Look out the window. Exit 216. At least in Texas, exit numbers are generally mile markers. So it's not that every highway would have an exit 1, an exit 2, an exit 3, because if one highway passes 1 mile marker and there's something relevant there worth putting an exit, there will be an exit 1. However, if exit 1 is just tumbleweeds and dry dirt, there's not going to be an exit 1, you're just going to go straight on to 2. So it is anything but guaranteed that every highway would have an exit 216. He started looking, I started looking, and sure enough, there's only one. In the entire state of Texas, on the existing highway infrastructure we confirmed with the Great War of Separation, there was exactly one exit 216 in the state of Texas, and it's in a small town called Colorado City, Texas. There's not too much going on there, but remember, there was a war before this. New cities will have formed, old cities be destroyed. We don't know what's going on, so we immediately move into falsification. Let's see if we can prove it. So let's look back at those things I mentioned earlier. Mountains. In order for there to be a Shadow Valley, there must be a valley, there must be mountains. There are mountains, and even a valley in the range. 2. Railroads. We would need to know that trains have the ability to pass through here. So I looked, and I even found footage of trains passing through Colorado City, Texas. Put a check on that one. Famously, Yaira 1. In an attempt to kill Yanessa and Yantoni, Yaira blows up an oil field. So is there oil? Well, it turns out you can pull maps that show every permitted place to pull oil. If you're going to drill for oil, you have to have confirmed there's oil there, otherwise you're spending all kinds of money to get nothing. And man, when I applied that overlay to the map, the thing lit up like a Christmas tree. This is oil country. Check on that one. And then of course, the famous scene from Alpha Core 1, where Ingrid Valdez makes sure 2 people can't leave town should they start feeling too froggy. Is there an airport? Yes. It's small, but the most important part is already done. The runway exists. Everything else is buildings. There's a 2-mile long runway, which is big enough to launch private jets and land them very easily. And we never talked about giant planes. I don't know if those can land or launch off of a 2-mile runway, but I know a private jet can. Looking at everything, looking at the location, looking at the constants that we have that we can measure with. The geography makes sense, the mountain ranges. So when you put it all together, I think there is a very good chance that Florespark is located very near to Colorado City, Texas. Now, could we be wrong? Of course. It's a fictional book. It could just exist somewhere else completely. We'd be looking for certain things to falsify the theory, though. If the city were ever depicted on a coastline, theory's shot. If it's ever specifically said that where Bloodruth started is already to the west of that location, theory's shot. Or of course, we just find out where Florespark is in canon and it's not there, theory's shot. But right now, I think the best theory that's floating around as to where Florespark, Texas is coming from jokingly, that it's in Colorado City, Texas, or at least what used to be called Colorado City, Texas. So that's it. That's the theory. If you guys think I'm right, let me know down below. Please let me know why I'm wrong down below. Big shout out to Jokingly. If you guys know him, go let him know what you think of his theory. As new books come out, as we learn more about Florespark, we're going to be checking on this theory and seeing if everything lines up. So if you're interested in that and you want to see whether this theory stands the test of time, like, subscribe, and hang around for the next one. In the meantime, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you watching. Jokingly, thanks for letting me cover your theory. We'll see you in the next one.